Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. Today we're going to be talking about the Bigfoot bodies that were apparently recovered after the Mount St. Helens eruption back in 1980. Before we get into that, the Bigfoot Quest for the Wildman documentary series is still live on GoFundMe. If you're interested in donating to that and helping that project get off the ground, you can do so at the link down below. We're doing really good so far, and thank you to everybody who's donated in the last few months. So the Mount St. Helens Bigfoot bodies. I decided to make a video about this after somebody commented on my last Bigfoot body video, the one where a Bigfoot creature was discovered severely injured by a wildfire, and he was taken away and cared for medically. Somebody said that it reminded them very much of this Mount St. Helens case, which is very similar in the sense that there were Bigfoot bodies and Bigfoot creatures that were discovered, who were suffering from severe burns and other injuries after Mount St. Helens erupted back in 1980. So there's a lot of very interesting reports from that time. Multiple reports of people seeing helicopters flying around that were extracting these Bigfoot bodies. They would have, cargo nets hanging underneath them, and people said that they could clearly see, these cargo nets were full of Bigfoot bodies. Which, a helicopter flying overhead carrying something in a sling or in a cargo net, I don't know how clearly you'd be able to see exactly what was in that cargo net. It could be other animals such as bears or, some sort of hooved animal. But apparently people said they clearly saw these Bigfoot creatures. And there's also multiple reports of people who were part of cleanup crews who would be working alongside like the National Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers to, recover dead wildlife. You can imagine how many, creatures died from the Mount St. Helens eruption. There would be hundreds and hundreds, thousands of creatures just dead and rotting. So apparently there were crews who were there to, gather up all these corpses, and they would sort them out into piles, based on whatever species they were, if they're deer, if they're elk, whatever. But people claim that there was a pile for these Bigfoot creatures, and they were kind of covered with a tarp. And these people who saw this were told, not to speak of this. And it was to be very hush-hush and not to be brought up. So there's multiple cases like that. The most crazy story I've heard about this event, and it's definitely the craziest and most strangest Bigfoot story I've ever heard, is that there were Bigfoot creatures, one or two of them, that were actually assisting the military in finding other Bigfoot creatures and Bigfoot bodies. So there was a witness who said he was part of a crew who was, in a vehicle, and they were parked there at this camp. They were like tents set up, and they were waiting, I guess, to get further orders. And he said that he saw another vehicle pull up, and a military man got out of it, and a gentleman who looked like a civilian, he got out of it as well, and they walked into this tent. And not too long after, the civilian walked out, and following behind him outside of the tent was a Bigfoot creature. So these people and this Bigfoot creature were inside of the tent together, and I guess the Bigfoot creature was, kind of injured. He had a bandage on his arm, he had some burns on his body, but according to this eyewitness, the creature and these people were actually communicating somehow. Apparently the Bigfoot was speaking whatever language Bigfoot speak, and I guess these people could understand what they were saying. So this would mean that there was some history there between the military and these Sasquatch creatures. If they could understand what they're saying, that would mean that they know the language, and they've been able to figure it out, I guess, which is crazy. This is stuff, that we don't hear about too often. When we think about the government Bigfoot cover-up, we think of, seeing helicopters out in the wilderness, gunning down these creatures. You hear stories like that come up every so often, but in this case, they were helping each other out, and they were actually communicating. So, like I said, this is the craziest and strangest Bigfoot story I've heard. But apparently, these other guys got back into their vehicle, but this Bigfoot creature got in the vehicle as well. I think it was some sort of Humvee or something along those lines. But basically, this Sasquatch creature would take these people out, like they would drive down the roads and stop at different locations, and they would get out of the vehicle, and the Bigfoot creature would, take them into these deeper wilderness areas, rocky areas where there's caves, and they would make calls. The Sasquatch creature would make calls and, wait for a response. And basically what they were trying to do was locate other Bigfoot creatures and, make an attempt to find others and, bring them out. And apparently, according to the eyewitness, they actually did find a couple creatures. One of them was severely injured, I guess, and they had to actually put it down. I don't know who this individual was, this civilian-looking guy. Some sort of Bigfoot researcher, I don't know, some sort of scientist maybe. But he was working alongside the military to, assist these Bigfoot creatures. And they were working together. And the Bigfoot creatures were receiving medical help from the military. And they were, riding in these military vehicles, which, like, how would a Sasquatch fit inside one of these vehicles, like a Humvee? I don't know. I guess it depends on, how old the Sasquatch is, how big it is. But seems pretty outrageous to me. This is most likely a made-up story, and it seems, like, incredibly fantastic. But who knows, I guess. Mount St. Helens is very popular for, Bigfoot encounters. You have the Ape Canyon incident that occurred back in 1924, which is probably one of the most famous Bigfoot stories ever, where a cabin was basically under assault by a group of Sasquatch after this group of miners shot one of them. So there are lots of Sasquatch reports in the area. I mean, this is in Washington. There are many, many reports from Washington. So it's really crazy too. I found a picture of Mount St. Helens before the eruption and a picture after, and it's just incredible, the amount of devastation. I also heard apparently after the eruption, about 2 months after, they were still finding Bigfoot bodies, washed up in the Cowlitz River. Which is also very interesting. And there were eyewitnesses who, once again saw helicopters extracting these bodies with cargo nets and slings. So I don't know. There's no photos of any of this. You'd think if you were going to the Mount St. Helens area, if you were a civilian and you were going to check out this, natural disaster, you would bring a camera and, you'd be able to get a few shots of these helicopters. I mean, I haven't seen any shots of these military helicopters carrying anything on a sling. I don't know, the story of these Bigfoot creatures having meetings with these military people and, actually communicating with each other and understanding each other and, working together to find these other creatures is something out of like a storybook. It would make a good story. I remember there was a book actually I read back when I was in junior high, and it was about Bigfoot creatures that were living in caves in and around Mount St. Helens. So I can't remember what it was called, but it was for a younger audience, and it was probably one of the first pieces of Bigfoot literature I ever read. When you look at the reports, you'll hear anything from there being 5 to 30 Bigfoot corpses that were extracted off the mountain. And, that's just the dead ones. You have the live ones that are walking around and interacting with people. When you look at this story, if this story's real, which it's probably not, it's like 99.999% likely that it's not real, then it would disprove, I guess, the supernatural side of the Sasquatch topic. These are physical beings that are turning up dead, that are interacting with people. You'd think if they had the ability to, like, disappear or use portals or whatever they do, you'd think that they would just be able to escape the eruption with ease. Unless, of course, their ability to, move between dimensions and planes of existence is something that, they can't control. Maybe it's like an involuntary thing that happens where they just slip in and out. It'd be really interesting if somebody turned up who was actually one of the people who interacted with one of these creatures, whoever this guy is this guy that was actually talking to them. You know, who is that guy? It'd be interesting to try and track him down, but it would definitely be impossible because the story's fake. You know, he's a made-up character. Imagine figuring out the Bigfoot language and being able to talk to them. I mean, when you hear a lot of the recordings, like the Sierra sounds, it does sound like they have a language, right? You can tell that there's words and like an actual dialect. But I don't know, there's actually people that were, you know, trying to decipher, you know, the Sierra sounds and figure out what they're saying, but I don't know how much progress they made. So anyways, that is all I have for today's video. I really want to know what you guys think about this one because it is absolutely outrageous. Definitely something that sounds like a work of fiction, you know, something you'd read about in a novel. The Bigfoot Quest for the Wildman documentary series is live on GoFundMe. If you want to donate to that project, if you want to help bring that project to life, if you want a free 3-part documentary series on YouTube in one of the most remote areas that I've been to in the Rocky Mountains, then check out the link down below and you can make a donation there. Thanks to everybody who's donated so far. It really means a lot. The Spreadshirt t-shirt shop is also available to anybody who wants to support the channel. And that way you actually get something physical in return. So check out the link for that down below. Thanks for watching this episode of Mountain Beast Mysteries. We'll see you next time.